Welcome everybody, my name is EruptionFang and this is Genlock. If you're new to my channel, typically how these videos go is that I'd sort of recap all of the plot that happened and talk about how that grows the setting and the characters and give my opinion on what happened. But considering this is the series premiere, that's a little hard to do. You can't exactly say how this episode affects the characters when they've hardly even been established. So, I'm going to be taking this video into its own direction for now. First topic is the plot, more specifically the fact that I honestly couldn't tell you what it's about. Very clearly there's a war between two sides as wars typically go, but beyond that, I couldn't explain much else. There's a few things that I feel as though the opening episode should give the audience, one being tone. What type of series is this going to be? In that regard, the episode did its job. From all the technological advancements that are around, to the war that could appear right at your doorstep, you felt the panic the general public had and the sense of duty the Vanguard was carrying. It gave off a pretty good sense of just how random and prepared everyone needs to be. Then there's the setting, some of our characters, a direction for them to go, and of course the plot, informing the audience of the simple basics of what's happening while leaving much room for it to expand and be explored. This episode definitely left a lot to be explored in the future because they didn't explain anything in the present. And I feel as though in that regard, this episode didn't deliver in informing me what I could expect. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take a look at episode 1 of some other Roosterteeth shows. In the first episode of RWBY, it establishes who the bad guy is and who the good guys are. Now, Roman's motivation is pretty boring, but you know what it is. It gives Ruby a set path explaining why she wants to be a huntsman, and set the direction for where the show is heading. In episode 1 of Nomad of Nowhere, it sets up that the Nomad is being hunted because there's a reward. Whether it be money, power, or whatever, you knew why he was being hunted and why people were hunting him. You see what I'm getting at? I don't know what's happening in Genlock. Who are we fighting? Why are we fighting them? What are they doing? And why are they doing it? We got so much action this episode, but I don't know anything about what's going on, and by the sounds of it, they don't know anything either. What is this? What is that? I don't know, and you don't know apparently. They mentioned the Union. Why do you know about them but not their tech? By the sounds of it, you've been preparing for this. But what is this? When the antagonists are nothing but this faceless group with no clear motivation, I find it hard to start caring. I know the show is about a global culture war and outlooks and stuff, but I don't know that because of episode 1. I know that because of Gray's interviews. So, what are the Union's outlooks and why wasn't it established in the first episode? I feel as though the basics of who they are and what they do should have been made clearer. Now, I wasn't looking for some deep, in-depth, philosophical information dump telling us absolutely everything about them and their plans all in the first episode, but just something so I sort of know who they are. I'm 100% certain the show will delve deeper into who they are and expand its lore, but I feel as though we were given nothing to go on in this first episode. Well, what about the characters? Hard to say considering we haven't even been introduced to all the people Roosterteeth slaps you in the face with. Chase and Miranda are the two most prevalent this episode, and the interactions between them are good and believable. They're a couple, that's about it. We also get introduced to 3 other characters, 2 of which are pilots and 1 being a mechanic. It's hard to say right now the role they play because we know they're not part of the Genlock program, but they still seem to have some significance, most likely in Miranda's storyline. But just in terms of this episode, it felt like everyone was the exact same person. Like, I get this isn't actual military and people talk like this, but I feel it really didn't help anyone's character. What makes Chase stand out above the others? Not much. I mean, there were other pilots there as well, and he wasn't leading. Everyone seems ready and willing to risk their own lives in battle, same as Chase did. So I don't know any discernible traits that fit to Chase. Same goes for Miranda. What do I know about her? She's dating Chase. That's what I know about her. Everyone shared the same amount of optimism, comedy, banter, that it all felt like a pool of the same person. In terms of the dialogue, everyone was using the lingo. Bravo 6, multiple bogeys in your AO. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this type of speak. It sounds super generic, as though I was running through a Call of Duty campaign and the AI keeps screaming at me what to do. I can't tell any of you apart, you're all saying and doing the exact same thing. But not every character was like this, as I'm sure a lot of people are gonna latch onto this guy, Dr. Weller. God damn it, he's just so different to every other character, it's so entertaining. The way he talks, the way he walks, he carries himself in a completely different manner to literally everyone else this episode, and it makes him stand out, as it should. And I hope once the rest of our characters get introduced, things will be less military. I'm more than certain Gray knows how important it is to make each character be their own unique person, but just the cast we got this episode wasn't that. I hope more can be done in the future to make them not all feel the exact same. Now real quick, I find it important to say this right now before I trigger more people. This isn't a bad episode. Nothing in this episode makes me think, oh man, they really fucked themselves. The point I'm really trying to get across is that I think it should have done more for being its first episode. If this episode be placed anywhere else other than the beginning or end, I'd have different things to say about the plot and the characters. But in my opinion, it was just lacking in some places. Now a hot point of contention regards the animation, more specifically its frame rate, and I'd be lying if I said it wasn't noticeable, because it is. Anytime the characters are walking or sitting around having a conversation, anytime things are taken in a slower pace, you can tell that things look a bit choppy, and it can be distracting at times. However, on the flip side, anytime it's an action sequence or shit really begins to move a mile a minute, you can't tell whatsoever. Things are moving at such a speed that you couldn't tell if frames were there to begin with. In regards to the combat, me personally, when it comes to aerial combat, I don't find it that entertaining. The planes flying around and shooting, it's just not my cup of tea. But what's really well done here is the camera movement. It's always in motion during the action, often using multiple angles and perspectives during a scene. Sometimes it almost feels like there's a cameraman off to the side recording everything. Other times it goes first person, like when missiles are fired. It's really nice and fluid, and it adds its own unique level of immersion into these scenes. So the camera work and frame rate during the action sequences are really good. But it's still a noticeable animation in general. Whether or not it's a flaw is up to the viewer. I can look past it if it is meant to be more smooth, but then again, it could just be a stylistic choice that the show wanted to take the series in. So personally right now it's up to the viewer to decide if it can be tolerated or looked past. I'm sure it's pointless to talk about the acting because just look at these names. These are not low-tier actors we're talking about. If it's bad, then it's on the writers. The two people specifically I find myself worried for are Chad and Blaine. Chad was in this episode and Blaine is actually part of the main cast, so I'm more worried for him. But in this episode, Chad sounded very Chad. I've always found it hard in some cases to separate the character from the person who voices them, but every now and then there's just that person I can't suspend my disbelief for. In Ruby, it's Barbara as Yang, and here, I know it's Chad. You want to know how I know it's him? I keep calling him Chad. I don't even know his character's name, I've just kept calling Chad, Chad. And so with the inability to suspend my disbelief, it's gonna be harder for me to say whether or not his and Blaine's acting ends up being bad, or me thinking that they just sound weird. But sticking to the topic of the voice acting, I found myself enjoying the beginning scene with Chase's family the most this episode. The mom just had this sort of energy and happiness to her that came across as super genuine. Weller has his own charm, but goddamn, if this woman was not the best thing this whole episode, I don't know what is. Now, before the show came out, I wasn't that excited for it. Not only did I not know anything for as long as it was being promoted, but this type of show typically isn't my thing. I'm not big on mech series. There hasn't been one to date that I've watched and really liked. But of course, because of this channel, I was most definitely going to watch Genlock. But after watching the first episode, I can say, it hasn't brought me around. I'm not any more interested into the world or the characters as I was before the show came out. I know just as much as I did going into it as I do after watching it. I'm hoping things pick up a lot more when we get our actual main cast of characters. Hopefully personalities can be different, dialogue won't sound as mundane and generic, and I can start to feel invested. This episode didn't really invest me into anything. I went into it with a meh attitude and left feeling the exact same way. For the series premiere, I'd personally have to say it was underwhelming, but I don't believe reflects what the series is going to be. Like I said earlier, it's not a bad episode, but I believe it should have done more.